This is episode 1 of Gumma Life, the podcast. I'm Tracy Colson-Ante, and our guest today is Dr. Andrew Jolivette. We're talking tradition, preserving all things Creole, and the hows and whys around the what are you question. Let's get into it. Okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Today we have my brother from another mother, Andrew Jolivette. It's actually Dr. Andrew Jolivette, but I just can't bring myself to do it because he's just my brother. But I want to welcome him to my very first episode because he loves me enough to do it with me. So I'll let him tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does.
Bonjour. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? Andrew Jolivette. I am talking to you all from San Diego, California, Kumeyaay territory, the indigenous people from this territory. I was born and raised in San Francisco, which is a Ohlone territory. San Francisco is also known as Yalamu. I work in the Department of Ethnic Studies at UC San Diego, where I'm the department chair and the director of a new program in Native American and Indigenous Studies. And as Tracy said, yes, we go back a long time, and she's my sister. Her mother was another mom to me, and I cherish her, Mama Janet and Tracy and her family very much. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much. And all of that being said, I know your dad is from here, and so you still country, even though you was born and raised in San Francisco.
You know, sure, you're right. You know that. Yep, yes, indeed.
I'm just saying. And so we met like 20 something years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I think actually, you know what? Now it might be more. I think it might be exactly 20. It was 2000 or a little bit before 2000. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because you were working on getting your PhD then, right?
That's right. So, I like to tell this story. I had been interested, growing up in California, like a lot of Creoles, right? We have our diaspora. Your mom always talked about, the Creole diaspora and how we're just spread out all over, right? And all the different migrations in Chicago and LA and so my family was no different, but I was always kind of interested in that. And so my dad's Creole, my mom's African American mostly, and a little bit European, a little bit Native as well, but mostly African American. And so I was always kind of like, I got what Creole was, and we were doing Creole stuff, but we didn't talk about it as much. So it was always this interesting thing where people in California are like, oh, you must be half, Hispanic or Latino or half Native American or half white and half black. That was their assumption. They didn't know what Creole was. And so by the time I decided I wanted to go into graduate school, I said, I started doing research. I said, they got a Creole Heritage Center. What you know? So contacted your mom, I think was the first person I talked to there. And this had to be about 1999 or something.
Yeah, it was like right after the Creole Center was formed.
Mm-hmm. And what's funny as I think back on that, Tracy, there was so much stuff that they had there already for it to just been open. They had so many resources. I remember Louis McTwire had the Bayou Talk and all those newspapers, all these ventures that people did. But your mom and the folks there had cataloged everything. So when I got there, so I contacted them. I fly into Raywood, Liberty, Texas, Creole colony. Very, big, important, time where the Creoles had been there over 100 years living in Liberty and Raywood, Texas. So my dad's first cousin, Beverly, and her husband, we had talked a lot about, what I was doing. And so they said, oh, and actually, Beverly's, I think, the one who told me, or her husband, there's a Creole Center up there. And that's how I looked it up. And so Beverly and her daughter, my cousin Lori, drove us from Raywood all the way up to Natchitoches. And I think it was on a Sunday. Today is a Sunday. It's come full circle. It was a Sunday afternoon, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And so I really appreciated that your mom showed up, to open it up and was waiting for us. And she was there. We talked for a while. And you know how it is with Creole people. The first couple minutes, we had made a connection. I think it was Mark Guidry and my cousin Lori had known each other. And we got to talking and whatnot. And so, yeah. And then the rest, we were there I stayed there a couple weeks, did my research, would go in there every day, and it was your mom, and Louise, Lorenz, who also worked there. We drove back to Lake Charles. They brought me back home. Creole people, it's really about family. If I
Yeah.
can say anything today, we're about kinship and family. I do a lot of studies around Native American, community. And the research I was doing then was because we talk so much about Creoles as black and white. But I was like, well, nobody ever talks about this other part. I want to learn more about this, but from the cultural part, not necessarily the racial part. And I feel like that's the thing that we got in terms of Creole that's so similar. And I do think it's somewhat African too. But this sense of like how we are all connected. The first thing we ask, right? Who's your people? Who's your mom? Who's your
Yes.
dad? And so they drove me back to Lake Charles, I remember, and that's when I met you. And we had food, we talked. My cousin Phil, whose family's from Cane River, not too far from Natchitoches, where the Creole Center, is at. He came to meet me. He's married to my cousin. He's married to my cousin Cynthia, but he's my cousin too.
Yeah.
And but he's Matwire, and his mom Dorothy. She was there. I remember we had rice dressing and I think some barbecue and potato salad. I can taste it right now. I can see it sitting right there.
Yeah.
And shoot, 2-3 hours. I think we were sitting there and just talking. I got to record Dorothy, who was up I think 90 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and all her stories. So I have very fond memories, and that really helped. Your mom, you all, like, that helped me. I'm eternally thankful. It helped kind of launch my career, and also just my personal connection to my people.
Yeah. And I remember so much because mom was so excited that somebody so young was interested, and
Mm-hmm.
that, you were taking this on as your project. And, because, we talked every day, and would call me every day and give me the report of what y'all had done or whatever. And, so when y'all came to Lake Charles, it was like, wow, finally, I felt on my side, like I've told people a billion times, like growing up, it wasn't, I didn't have that typical childhood. My parents were a little older when they had me. And my mom, the Creole Center existed in our living room for years before it actually had four walls and a name and, this real thing, this tangible thing. So I didn't spend my weekend spending the night at a friend's house, or, I wasn't a cheerleader. I wasn't all these things. I was doing research. I was in a library. I was at a conference, and I was always the youngest person there. I was always expected to be that voice of the next generation. And it's weird for me now because I still feel like that's supposed to be my role, and it's not, because now there are generations after me because we're
Mm-hmm.
getting a little older.
I'm telling
But
you.
I mean, things have changed so much, but it was when you and I met, it was that first time that I didn't feel like the weight of
By
all
yourself.
of her work was just on my shoulders. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and this reminds me of what you're talking about, a story. Because I went to those first early years within those, like from the time the story I just told, and probably over the next, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years or whatever, where there were conferences, New Orleans, Chicago, Los Angeles, Vegas. Um, I would show up and people were older, but there was a young cohort. I remember there's some other people that would show up. Mary Rodriguez, there was a Dustin Oncolod, Charity Morell, Clifford, and Christoph Landry, different people that I did meet, a few folks, but I would show up in these spaces. I'm like, the average age here is like 50, 60 years old, I think.
Yeah.
Here I am, 20 some years old. And it's interesting to think about, over time, how that's changed. I mean, now you look at the advent, like social media, I think's gone a long way into giving more people access and,
Yeah.
visibility to the culture or whatever. And so, for me, I had felt that way too. And it was it felt so good though to be in that space, even though it was still like, um, people kind of debating what Creole was, I think. And so for me, I hope that I know that debate still happens sometimes, but I hope we're also kind of moving not past it, but that we're moving forward and thinking about other important things too, not just, oh, what is a Creole, right? Because at the end of the
Right.
day, I mean, if you got family roots and it's from Louisiana and, um, it's about those connections and you come from some of those families, you are. I mean, you just know. And that's how tribes identify too. I mean, that's how we do that tribal identity. It's not how much or if you speak the language per se, it's do you know the culture? And even when you move out of the state, I mean, we did Lent just like you would. I mean, we were super Catholic. My grandmother was so happy I was thinking about being a priest when I was 13, and she was sad when I didn't end up doing it. But I mean, you carry those traditions with you. I remember we used to box Easter eggs, and a lot of people don't. I don't know if that was just Southwest Louisiana or other places, but Easter we'd box Easter eggs, or people who would, midnight mass, and then you'd come home and you'd open Christmas presents on Christmas Eve or
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving. They drew the names out of I mean, so many very specific things to Louisiana. And the food, I will also say sometimes people reduce so much of our culture to the food, but also our food's so complicated and our food tells a story. Our food really tells a story. And I think just like our music tells a story. And I
Yeah.
think I just hope this new generation thinks about, some of those things too. And I'm glad people are keeping it going and they're learning about their heritage. Just today, I'll tell you, um, I finally broke down. I said, I don't believe in the DNA test and all that, but I want to see some cousin stuff. So I did a 23andMe. Turns out I got a bonus aunt. Here's the drama for y'all. Yeah, the Tracy doesn't even know this yet, y'all.
I
So, but
don't. I can't believe you did
this
that.
this Creole too. I know. I'm telling you. But I got and everything I saw in terms of the ethnicity breakdown was about what I expected in terms of the European, African, and Native. But the fact that it turns out I have my dad. There's another aunt that we didn't know about, and a couple first cousins. But and it was ironic too, because they were in California, but they ended up in New Orleans. Ain't that something? But
Hmm.
the fact that young people, regardless, because there's a lot of Creoles I'm learning, younger people, either because they don't know, maybe it's not the example I gave, but maybe it was their grandparents left, or even if they're in Louisiana or Houston, which is another big area where people went, if they don't know, that they're trying to find out. And I think we have to encourage that and support that. And I just hope for folks who are listening, please get involved. Whatever you do, you are welcome, but get involved and do something to help support the preservation of our culture. It's a really rich and beautiful culture. I was talking to a friend the other day who's not Creole and said, but we were talking about, she's Latina. She's from Mexico, her family originally. Um, and she was saying, yeah, New Orleans feels like another country,
Yeah.
right? And you look at that architecture, you see the Spanish architecture, you see the French influence. Um, and so I think it's really important that we preserve our heritage.
Yeah, and I think that when, you know, thinking back to when we first met and the things that were going on, things have changed so much because that was all pre-social media.
Yes.
So the conversations that are happening now weren't even happening then to that extent because it literally had to be a one-on-one, face-to-face type thing.
Mhm.
Or when these conferences were held. That's when we all found each other. That's when we got to get together and talk about stuff. And, that's one of the things that I'm really hoping to bring back through Gumbo Life is to have those live events again and to have people come together and see each other and do exactly what we always do. Who's your mom and daddy? Where y'all from? Figure out how y'all are cousins, all that kind of good stuff. But that's because those are the types of things that I think
We're
get
missing.
people, yeah, they miss it. They miss it and it makes them motivated to do exactly what you're saying, to really get out there and do the work and do more than just comment on Facebook, but actually do the work. And people ask me, how do I do that? What do I do? And we're so spoiled now. We have these wonderful smartphones. And so a lot of times it's as simple as just turning the video on when, the elders in your family are talking, and
Hmm.
catching those stories that will be lost when they're gone, or having your child interview their grandparent and ask them, what were things like when you were growing up, what did you say, how did people treat you, what were your experiences. And that's a way to preserve it. And then those kids have that. And I'm very adamant about that because, my mom was born and raised in California too. And, she kind of did the opposite of what, me and my husband did. Like, she met my dad out here, and then she moved to Louisiana, and Richie and I met in Vegas, then he moved to Louisiana. But when my mom moved out here, she was really homesick and she missed her family. She missed her, she's got a large family. She missed the brothers and sisters and all her cousins and everything. So we would go to California every summer, and she would take at the, because we didn't have smartphones then, because I was a kid then. And she would just take like a tape recorder and tapes, and she would just go sit it down on the table right in the middle of everything that was going on, and she would just record it. And she caught songs and jokes and stories, and she just had boxes of these tapes. And all of those people are gone now, but you can still get to hear their voice. You get to remember those stories. Those stories aren't lost. And there's parts in it where the grandkids are like, popping up in grown folks conversation. You know how that is.
Hmm.
Then,
Hmm.
so then you hear them fussing whatever kid that was, but it's funnier now to us because it's like we're all adults. So we remember that, yet when you were 5 or 6 years old, you were the most annoying cousin, and you definitely were in the
Hmm.
middle of whatever conversation was being had. But I think that's a
That was me.
small but
Hmm.
significant way that people can really do exactly what you're saying, and to preserve what our culture is, and to ask those questions, and to have it so that that next generation that wasn't there, or wasn't born yet, or wasn't um privy to that. Because like in a lot of cases, like for me, I was all the way out in Louisiana. I only seen my cousins and grandparents once a year in California.
Hmm.
The fact that we have that now, it just makes it so much easier um to really do that.
It is, it's changed. There's good and there's things that change about that. I wanted to go back, I think to what you're saying about the conference. I'm so excited about what you're doing with Gumbo Life, and so excited that you are making this your own and really thinking about, how to bring us back together, particularly in this time of COVID and everybody's kind of antsy and cooped up and nervous and frustrated, right? And so I'm
Right.
just really looking forward to a time, and even if it wasn't COVID, right, that yes, it has become easier. We don't write letters or we don't go visit like we used to do. And so I think people really want that, though. I know I want that, and I think that's what it means. That's what Creole is all about, right? Is getting together. It was the la-las, the dances, or boucherie, which is great. We still have some of these things. I think this is a moment for us to really get all together. I close my eyes right now. I'm kidding you all not. And it's always been my dream to just open my eyes. And I saw this, on a certain scale. And I think we're in a different place because of like the social media we've been talking about. I just open my eyes and there's 1,000, 2,000. I mean, there's over 1 million of us Creoles, there's like probably
Yeah.
about 2 million of us, and but just to see like easily 500, 1,000, 2,000 people, dancing, doing genealogy, going to history workshops or food demonstration things, language, stuff. And so I think this is our moment, and I'm so excited for what you are doing because uh, I think a lot of people are hungry for it and they need it and they want it. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of similarities. People talk about our culture, like they say, "Oh, Creoles are like the Latinos of like the United States," and I think Latinos are struggling with their identity. And it's funny because now it's like, well, what can they learn from us? Because I think Creole, we've always said it's a culture; it's not a race. right? And
Right.
so I think there's also this thing of like people use that term Latinx now, and people, and then you have all the Afro Latinos and indigenous Latino or from those regions saying we're not, that term don't work for us. And I think Creole, yes, people will probably argue with me on this, but for the most part, in my experience, after, my whole life being a Creole, but also the last 20, 25 years researching it, I think we've always actually really tried to think in creative ways about Creole as a term that included all of what we were, that gumbo mix that folks talk about, that, African, indigenous, Latin European, sometimes it's got a little bit of Asian mix in there, that I think Creole, we've tried to make that an inclusive term. So it kind of bugs me sometimes because people will say like, oh, those, it always made me laugh, like people, Creole's just light-skinned Black people. You just reduced us real quick.
Yeah.
We're a little bit more
Right.
than that. It's a lot more than that,
A lot more than that.
and also how they represent, right? Like I think about, was it Courage in the Heart, the Vanessa Williams, where she plays Henriette DeVille. It's interesting to me also how Creoles get represented. I always joke because people are like, Chadwick Boseman, rest his soul, wonderful actor, wonderful person, played Thurgood Marshall. And I always thought it was interesting. And then Taraji Henson, who played Catherine, oh gosh, I'm blanking on her last name right now, though, but in Hidden Figures. Um, and it was always interesting, like the role reversals in terms of like phenotype, where you have people who you can be darker and play a lighter person, but you can't be lighter and play a darker person. And
Right.
I think that speaks to this history where we assume that that we got to accept people, and that we all have challenges. They just look different, whether you're brown, high, light, yellow, whatever the term they want to throw at us, that we are people, and it doesn't matter how much or what all exactly we're mixed with. It's about that we're family, that we are kin, um, and that we're connected, and that we honor all of who we are.
Right. Right. And that's been, I guess, probably how I've been able to describe it to my kids and to other kids and I just wrote a blog post about this that I'm about to put out in the next few days. And it's how to answer what are you without rolling your eyes so far in the back of your head you flip over. Um, but that's really what it's, and part of what I write about is I had went to Colson School when he was in seventh grade. Yeah, to do a filet demonstration. Surprising, right? So I
Great.
do the demonstration and everything, and I was in his class and he was actually homesick that day. So he wasn't even there. And I get done and I said, okay, any questions? And all these hands shot in the air. And I'm thinking that I just did such a fantastic job. You know what I mean? Got all
Right.
these questions.
Like,
People are so
yes, young people
engaged.
have questions. Yes.
Yes. And the very first question was, Miss Tracy, what is Colson? And then everybody put their hand down and basically,
Had the same
collectively
question.
agreed that was our question.
Wow.
And my response back to them was, what would my answer matter to you? Are you his friend? Yeah, he's one of my best friends. Okay. Is it going to make you stop being his best friend with whatever answer I give you? Is it going to make you care about him any less? Is it going to make him not, are you not going to love him as your friend anymore? And everybody, no. And I said, then why does it matter? Why do
Hmm.
you need to know? And I think it's that there's science behind that. And that's why I wrote the blog post about people just needing to know, because people that think they wouldn't normally ask that question. And I was so surprised that that was, as a seventh grader, and it was a boy that asked, a lot of times they're not the most apt to raise their hand and ask a bunch of questions or call attention to themselves, but it was important enough and it was something they needed to know so bad that they got over whatever fear or anxiety to make sure that they asked Miss Tracy, what is Colson? So, you know,
Yeah, it's a question, right, that we get so much growing
yeah,
up.
It's a question, but and the thing is and what I've told them is that we are so many things, and think of yourself like a tree that is huge
Mm,
with these
mhm.
deep roots, and every root, every part of that tree is a part of you. So if you deny any part of it, if you
You can't keep
ignore or
going.
don't say that you're not any of those things, and those roots will wither and they die and they disappear and go away, and you lose
Yeah.
that big part of who you are. But it's also denying your ancestors that came before you. So
Amen.
um, the way that I've told them is to stay rooted. And it means a whole lot more than what it does to other people, but to stay rooted in what in who you are. And that's kind of where my Explore the Root tagline came from, is people understanding what that foundation is, and doing what you're talking about and doing the work to preserve it and to know it and to be able to pass that on to your children, to pass it on to their children. I think that's really important.
No, absolutely. And, that's such a wonderful metaphor, the tree and those branches. And that's what I've always said. And it's like, I think it is important that people know who we are, but I think there's something behind the question of the who are you, right? Or what are you? It's sometimes it's nice because people want to identify with you. I've always, particularly being in California, having darker skin, but maybe European features, look like I'm, Arab or Eritrean or Ethiopian. So people, are you Habesha? Are you Ethiopian? Are you Indian? Are you from Bangladesh? And not believing you when you say that. So I also understood that they were asking from a place of trying to want to connect and do that kinship thing we've been talking about. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's other times where I remember my dad showing up similar to you, and people were like, well, wait, that can't. I remember a kid I was teaching in a summer program. He was probably 10. And he said, that can't be your dad. He's white and you're brown. How is that possible? So I think we have to get past color, because what I'm also learned over the years is what you see on the outside, also, you don't even know what's going on the inside. And so
Right.
I think that that's really important. But all of this to say, Tracy, this conversation we're having, which I really appreciate, it reminds me of something my dad used to say, "Fat quoi tu vas faire, Tiburg," which means do what you have to do, little boy or young man. And so I was like, oh, I always carried that with me, "Fat quoi tu vas faire." Like he was talking about schoolwork or getting an education, and then he would say in English, and then your time is your time. And I think that that's what I would just really share with the listeners is, find what you're passionate about, explore the culture, be open to it, don't limit it, um, and do what you got to do to like keep it going. In Native culture, we talk about the 7 generations that came before, and that this current generation, we work to make sure that the 7 generations that'll come after us have what they need for this world to continue and be, in balance, so we're not harming the world, we're not harming each other, that we have a good place, and that our kids, it's like all the most Creole people I know of, and like just like most Black people or most Native people, or just people period, they want their kids to have it a little bit better than they had it. And I
Yeah.
think that that's true of us too. And so like my dad told me, "Fais quoi tu vas faire, tipo," do what y'all got to do, and make it better, make it better.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you um, being my first guest and letting me experiment here. I have wanted to do this for so long, and we have talked about it many, many, many times. So I'm excited that this
Me
is
too.
happening. And I think it's going to be something that is needed, and kind of a avenue to kind of the next steps and some things that I have coming up. But I wanted you to share, if you wanted to, how people can get in touch with you or how they can read some of your work, um, any of your books, just any information that you want to give, so people, if they want to just follow up with you.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. And, I love talking to people. I love meeting new people, and especially our people. And folks can email me at a Jolivette, Jolivette, a Jolivette at UCSD. That's like University of California, San Diego, UC San Diego .edu. So that's A Jolivette at UCSD.edu. You can also find me on Facebook, just Andrew Jolivette, or Instagram, Creole Andres. Andres on that Creole. And then you can find my work on Amazon by just Googling my name. The title of the book that's most relevant for this is called Louisiana Creoles, Cultural Recovery and Mixed Race Native American Identity. And finally, folks can find me at speakoutnow.org. And you can just type my name and you'll get some more info. So that's speakoutnow.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miss Maisie. You will. Mm-hmm.
And
Thank
I'll have more information in the show notes for you guys. I'll make sure and list all of Andrew's contact information. So if you have any questions or want to continue this conversation, you'll have a way to find out more about him, but also to maybe get those questions answered. Andrew, I love you a whole lot.
I love you too. I miss you, and I can't wait to see you. And we're gonna go to Billy and Ray's and
We're
get
gonna
some
find out
pepper
who they
jack boudin
are.
balls, and we're gonna find out who they are. I told y'all. I told her. I said, Tracy, we gotta find. And who are Billy and Ray? You gotta
Who
do a
are they?
podcast on it. Who that?
Who are
Who
they
that
and
make?
where they been?
Who that make them boudin balls?
So if y'all don't know, I live in Opelousas, and we have Ray's Boudin, we have Billy's Boudin, and Billy's Boudin has a pepper jack cheese Boudin ball, which is a heart attack, all in one small, very tasty Boudin ball. But so that's who Billy and Ray are. We just want to know who they are, where they've been, and can we get some more?
Can we get some more of them boudin balls? And they got crawfish balls. And yeah, y'all get y'all some of that gratin, some crackling from them too. Yeah, that food is good. Yeah, I miss the food. So I can't wait to see you, sis.
Can't wait to see you too. Thank you so much.
Love you. All right.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Great conversation. And I'm so grateful to have Andrew in my world. I hope you enjoyed our talk. And if you did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and get every episode straight to your phone. And while you're at it, give us 5 stars. You can also check out gumbolife.com for our merchandise, articles, podcast episodes, and more. See you next time. Hi, friends, and don't forget to shop the Gumbo Life store at www.gumbolife.com. Post your pictures on social media and your Gumbo Life gear. Hashtag it Creole Lifestyle. Music by Cody Cassard. Editing and production by Tracy Ante.